6:11 in the morning. The alarm goes off. You reach over, and before your feet even touch the floor, your thumb is already moving across a screen. You didn't decide to do that. Your hand did it before your mind woke up. This is how most mornings actually begin, not with intention, with a reflex. Somewhere along the way, waking up early turned into a trend. Cold showers, 5-mile runs, journaling before sunrise. Thousands of people attempt some version of a disciplined morning routine every single month, and within 2 weeks, almost all of them quietly abandon it, not because they're lazy, not because they lack willpower in the way they assume. They fail because they misunderstood what the challenge actually was. They thought it was a test of the morning. It isn't. It's a test of the night before, the mind underneath, and a single decision that happens faster than thought itself. The Stoics understood this over 2,000 years ago, long before anyone had a phone to check, an alarm to snooze, or a routine to post online. And once you understand what they knew, the actual mechanics of why discipline collapses, you'll never look at your mornings, or your failures, the same way again. By the end of this video, you won't just know why you keep failing, you'll have a complete system for making sure you don't fail again. Welcome back to Stoic Forge Explained, where ancient Stoic wisdom meets the challenges of modern life. Today we're taking apart the Stoic Morning Challenge, not the version you've seen in 100 motivational videos, but the real mechanism behind why it works for a rare few, and why it collapses for almost everyone else. Prinic Life 1. The myth of the morning person. Most people believe the Stoic Morning Challenge is about waking up early. Set the alarm for 5. Get up. Win the day. That's the whole idea, right? So they buy the alarm clock. They set the intention the night before, lying in bed, genuinely convinced tomorrow will be different. And for 2, maybe 3 days, it works, powered entirely by motivation, which is the most unreliable fuel a human being can run on. By day 4, the alarm goes off, and the negotiation begins in the dark. Just 10 more minutes. I'll make it up tomorrow. Today doesn't count. I barely slept. Here's the mechanism behind that negotiation, and it is almost nothing to do with laziness. Willpower isn't a personality trait you either have or don't. It behaves more like a depleted resource, a battery that drains with every decision you make throughout the day. What to eat, how to respond to a difficult email, whether to speak up in a meeting, whether to snap at your partner or hold your tongue. Every one of those choices draws from the same limited account. By the time you're lying in bed at 5 in the morning, that account is often already near empty from the day before it even starts. This is why the first attempt at a disciplined morning almost always happens on a Monday, right after a weekend of rest. The battery is full, and it almost always fails by Thursday, once the week's decisions have quietly drained it dry. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this exact resistance in his private journal, a document he never intended anyone else to read, which is precisely what makes it so honest. He complained in his own handwriting about not wanting to get out of bed. An emperor of Rome, the most powerful man in the known world, negotiating with his own blankets like anyone else. His answer wasn't a burst of motivation. It was a question, asked plainly. Am I on this earth to feel warm under blankets, or to do what I was made for? Notice what he didn't do. He didn't wait to feel excited. He didn't try to manufacture enthusiasm. He relied on identity. A decision about who he was made in advance, so it wouldn't need to be remade every single morning under the worst possible conditions with the least available willpower. This is the core failure point almost nobody talks about. People treat the Stoic Morning Challenge as a test of enthusiasm. It was never meant to be. It was meant to be a test of a decision made once, applied automatically regardless of how you feel in the moment. Asterisk, the protocol, the pre-decision rule, designed before, write one sentence. Tomorrow morning, I get up because. Not a task. Not because I have a meeting. A reason tied to who you want to be. Because I don't want to be someone who is controlled by comfort. Because I promised myself I would follow through. When the alarm hits, you're not deciding anymore. You already decided the night before, with a full battery and a clear head. We're just executing a decision your rested mind already made. not negotiating with your exhausted one. The Stoic principle behind it is called the discipline of assent. The idea that you don't have to accept every impulse your mind hands you the moment it arrives. An impulse to stay in bed is just data, not a command. You can pre-approve the response before the impulse ever shows up, the same way a pilot runs a checklist before takeoff instead of deciding what to do mid-flight. But knowing this isn't enough on its own, because there's a deeper problem waiting the moment your feet actually hit the floor, one that has nothing to do with getting up at all. Cha! Principle 2. The first 10 minutes set the entire day. You get up. You did it. The hardest part is over, or so it seems. And then, almost automatically, before your eyes are even fully adjusted to the light, you check your phone. This single act has quietly become the most damaging part of the modern morning. Not because of the content itself, but because of what it does to your attention, before your attention has even chosen a direction of its own. Every notification, every headline, every unread message is a small demand. React to this now. Your brain, still barely awake, has no filter yet to sort what matters from what doesn't. It absorbs the first 50 pieces of information of the day as instructions on what to worry about, what to want, and what to fear. Psychologists refer to something like this as priming. The first input you receive shapes the interpretive lens through which you process everything that follows it. Epictetus, a man who was born enslaved and later became one of the most influential Stoic teachers in history, opened his most famous teaching with a single foundational distinction. Some things are within our control and some are not. Our judgments, our attention, our responses, those are ours. Everything else, other people's opinions, the news cycle, what happened overnight on the other side of the world, none of that was ever ours to begin with. The modern habit of checking a phone first thing in the morning hands your first moment of the day, freely and without resistance, to things outside your control, before you spent even a single second on the one thing that actually is. Picture a woman named Elena. Any of us could be her. She wakes up genuinely determined to have a focused, intentional day. She checks her phone, just for a second, fully intending to put it right back down. 40 minutes later, she's read 3 arguments online she has zero power to resolve, replied to 2 emails that could have waited, and felt her mood shift twice without noticing why. She hasn't gotten out of bed yet. The day hasn't started. It's already been hijacked by inputs she never consciously chose. This isn't a willpower failure. It's an architecture failure. The phone is designed by very smart people to capture exactly this kind of unguarded attention. Fighting it with willpower alone is like trying to outmuscle a current. The Stoic answer isn't more effort. It's a different starting position entirely. Asterisk the protocol, the no input window. Asterisk. For the first 30 minutes after waking, no screens, no social media, no news, no messages regardless of who they're from or how urgent they seem. Instead, choose one deliberate input. Cold water on your face, a short walk outside, complete silence, or a single page of a physical book. The goal isn't productivity, and it isn't about optimizing those 30 minutes for output. It's about ownership. You are choosing, deliberately, what deserves your attention before the world tries to choose it for you by default. This solves the first input problem. But there's a second, quieter battle happening at the exact same time. One almost nobody notices they're even fighting, because it doesn't announce itself the way a notification does. Principle 3. The discomfort you're actually avoiding. Ask most people why they skip their morning routine on a given day, and they'll say something like, "I was too tired," or "I just didn't have time." Ask them again, more honestly, and a different answer usually surfaces underneath. It was uncomfortable, and comfort won. This is the part almost no morning routine video is willing to talk about because it's not inspiring, it's uncomfortable to admit even to yourself. The body, cold and drowsy, is a battlefield of resistance before the world ever gets involved. Cognitive scientists describe something close to this as decision fatigue layered on top of a mild threat response. Anything unfamiliar or effortful, even something as small as leaving a warm bed on a cold morning, can register in the nervous system as a low-grade signal to avoid. Not real danger, just friction. and the brain is wired by millions of years of evolution to move away from friction rather than toward it. This is exactly what the Stoics trained for, deliberately and on purpose. They called it voluntary discomfort, the practice of choosing small, controlled hardship, not for the sake of suffering, but to prove to yourself repeatedly that discomfort is survivable and temporary. Seneca, one of the wealthiest and most influential men in Rome, would periodically sleep on the floor and eat the simplest food available, not because he had to, but so that poverty and hardship would never again hold power over him through fear alone. He was inoculating himself in advance against the discomfort he might one day face without choosing it. A disciplined morning is voluntary discomfort in miniature, practiced daily at low stakes. Cold air on your skin, an early alarm cutting through warm sleep. The urge to stay still, deliberately overridden by a decision you made the night before. Every single time you do it, you're not just building a habit, you're proving something concrete to your own nervous system. This feeling is not an emergency, and I do not have to obey it just because it's loud. Consider a man named Tariq, an accountant who decided to start running before work. The first morning, his alarm goes off and every cell in his body argues against getting up. He almost gives in. But he'd made a rule for himself beforehand. Not, I'll run if I feel like it, but I'll put my shoes on, no matter what. He puts the shoes on, and by the time they're laced, the resistance has already lost most of its power. The hardest part was never the run. It was the 60 seconds before it. Ask. The protocol, the 60-second override. Ask when resistance hits. Right as the alarm goes off, right before the cold shower, right before the workout. Commit to 60 seconds of movement only. Not the whole routine, just 60 seconds. Almost every time, the momentum built in those 60 seconds carries you naturally through the rest. The goal isn't to defeat discomfort in some dramatic, heroic way. It's simply to prove, quietly and repeatedly, that discomfort doesn't get a vote in what you do. But even once you're up, moving, and off your phone, there's a fourth, more dangerous failure point still waiting ahead. It doesn't show up in your body. It shows up in your mind, a few days later, at the exact moment you least expect it. Principle 4. The perfectionism trap. Day 1 goes well. You feel proud, almost surprised at yourself. Day 2, even better, you start to believe this time is different. Then day 3 happens. You sleep through the alarm, or life simply interrupts. A sick child, a late night at work, an emergency that had nothing to do with discipline at all, and the streak breaks. Here's what almost everyone does next, and it's the single most common reason the entire challenge collapses. They treat the broken streak as proof the whole thing failed. I already messed it up. There's no point continuing this week. I'll start fresh on Monday. One missed morning quietly turns into one missed week, which turns into the routine disappearing altogether, often without the person even noticing exactly when it happened. Behavioral psychologists sometimes call this the what the hell effect. Once a rule is broken a single time, the perceived cost of breaking it again drops sharply, because the mind has already, silently, reclassified itself as someone who failed at this. Once that identity shift happens, every future lapse feels like confirmation rather than an exception. The Stoics had an answer to this too, though it's often badly misunderstood by people who only know the phrase and not the philosophy behind it. Amore fati, the love of fate, doesn't mean pretending failure is secretly good or forcing yourself to feel grateful for setbacks in a hollow, performative way. It means refusing to let a single event define the entire story. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, over and over, in page after page of his private writing, that obstacles were not interruptions to his path. They were the path itself. A broken morning isn't evidence that the system failed. It's simply data, information about a single day, nothing more, nothing less. Consider a student named David, training for a set of exams that matter enormously to his future. He commits to a disciplined 6 a.m. study block, and the first 3 days go exactly as planned. On the 4th day, he oversleeps badly, wakes up at 9 furious with himself, convinced he's already blown it. The old pattern, the one almost everyone falls into, would have him abandon the entire plan out of shame, telling himself he'll restart properly next week. Instead, he does something smaller, quieter, and far more powerful. He simply resumes at 9 that same day, without ceremony, without a dramatic apology to himself, and without waiting for some imaginary clean slate. And the next morning, he's back at 6, as if the gap had never happened at all. That single decision, to return the same day instead of waiting for permission, is, in practice, the entire difference between people who eventually succeed at building discipline and people who quietly give up and never mention the attempt again. Ask. The protocol. The same-day return. Ask. If you break the routine, you don't wait for Monday, and you don't wait for a clean start that feels psychologically satisfying. You return the same day at the very next available opportunity, even if it's imperfect, even if it's hours later than planned. The rule isn't never miss a single day. The rule is simply this: never miss twice in a row. One missed morning is an event. 2 in a row is the beginning of a new unwanted habit. This solves the shame spiral that ends most attempts before they've had a real chance to become automatic. But it raises a harder, more uncomfortable question, one most people never bother asking themselves at all. And it's often the real reason the whole thing was fragile from the start. Principle 5. The missing reason. Here's an uncomfortable truth, and it's worth sitting with for a moment. Most people who attempt a Stoic morning routine are copying a behavior without ever actually adopting the belief underneath it. They saw someone online talking about discipline, watched a video like this one, and they wanted the result, the energy, the focus, the sense of control, without doing the slower, less visible internal work that actually produces it. This is exactly why the challenge collapses the moment novelty wears off. There's no engine underneath the behavior, driving it forward on its own. It's imitation, not conviction. And imitation, by its nature, only lasts as long as the excitement of the new thing does. The Stoics never separated the practice from the philosophy behind it. They saw that as a category error. Getting up early wasn't the goal in itself. It was a daily rehearsal for a much larger idea, that you are the author of your own responses, even in situations where you can't author your circumstances. The early morning was simply chosen as the first test of the day, small enough to practice on consistently, and hard enough that it actually mattered when you passed or failed it. Memento mori, the reminder that your time is finite and genuinely unknown in length, sounds heavy, even morbid, when it's stripped of context and turned into a slogan on a poster. But the Stoics used it as fuel, not as fear. Every morning you're given is one of a limited, uncounted number remaining. Wasting the first hour of it on autopilot, scrolling and reacting to things outside your control, isn't a small, forgettable loss. Multiplied across the length of an actual lifetime, it becomes one of the largest losses most people never even notice they're taking. Think about a woman named Priya, a mid-level manager who tried the Stoic morning challenge purely because a colleague recommended it. She had no real reason of her own, just a vague sense that successful people wake up early. 2 weeks in, she quietly stopped, and when a friend asked why, she genuinely couldn't articulate a reason beyond it just felt pointless. Contrast that with a man named Marcus, not the emperor, just a man who shares the name, who started the exact same routine after a health scare made him confront, directly, how much of his life he'd spent reacting instead of choosing. His reason was specific, personal, and uncomfortable to write down. 6 months later, he was still doing it, not because the routine had gotten easier, but because the reason underneath it had never stopped being true. Ask. The protocol. The one-line why. Ask. Before starting any Stoic morning challenge, write down, specifically in your own words, not borrowed from a video, what this routine is training you for, not to be more productive. Something real and personal, to stop feeling controlled by my own moods. To prove to myself, I can keep a promise I make to no one but myself. Read that line each morning before you begin, especially on the mornings you don't want to. A behavior without a reason is a costume, worn until it stops being fun to wear. A behavior with a real reason underneath it is a discipline, and discipline doesn't require the routine to stay fun in order to continue. Even with a genuine reason in hand, though, there's one more obstacle waiting. And for a huge number of people, it's the one that ends the attempt for good, often within the very first week. Principle 6. Copying the wrong model. Search Stoic morning routine online and you'll find cold plunges, 5-mile runs, 90-minute journaling sessions, meditation, cold showers, and complete digital detoxes all stacked together into one impossibly demanding hour, presented as if it's a single, non-negotiable package. Most people, in their initial burst of motivation, try to adopt all of it at once, and a system with 10 new components has 10 different points of failure, any one of which can bring the whole structure down. Miss one piece, oversleep by 20 minutes, skip the run because of rain, forget the journal, and the entire morning feels broken, even though 9 out of 10 pieces still happened successfully. The Stoics were, above almost everything else, realists. Epictetus taught that wisdom means clearly and honestly separating what's within your power from what isn't, and that principle extends to being honest about your actual current capacity, not some idealized version of it borrowed from a stranger online with a completely different life, a completely different schedule, and often, frankly, a completely different set of responsibilities. A rigid, borrowed routine, copied wholesale from someone whose circumstances share almost nothing with yours, isn't discipline. It's a costume that was never tailored to fit you in the first place. Think of a new father, named James, who tries to replicate an online influencer's full 90-minute morning stack. Cold plunge, 5-mile run, 20 minutes of meditation, journaling, and reading, all before 6:30. He has a newborn who wakes him twice a night, every night, without exception. Within a week, the entire routine collapses, not from a lack of discipline on his part, but because the design itself was never built for his actual life. He didn't fail the challenge. The challenge, as he'd copied it, was never realistic to begin with. Compare that to a woman named Sarah, in a nearly identical situation, also a new parent, also exhausted. She chooses one single action, 5 minutes of sitting in silence before she picks up her phone. That's the entire routine. It sounds almost too small to matter. But 6 weeks later, that 5 minutes has become completely automatic, and she's naturally, without forcing it, started adding a second small piece on top of it. Her routine grew because its foundation was actually solid enough to build on. Ask. The protocol. The minimum viable morning. Choose exactly one non-negotiable action. The smallest possible version of the routine that still genuinely counts as a real win. Not 5 habits stacked together. 1. Once that single action is unbreakable, consistent for several weeks in a row regardless of circumstances, and only then, add a second one. Discipline compounds over time the same way interest does. It is not installed all at once through sheer force of will, no matter how motivated you feel on day one. This is the piece almost every failed attempt is quietly missing, and it leads directly into the 7th and final principle, the one that ultimately changes what success even means in the first place. Principle 7. Redefining the win. Ask someone why they failed the challenge, and they'll usually describe it in stark absolute terms. I broke the streak on day 12, so I failed. The whole thing was a waste. But that framing was never actually Stoic to begin with. It was borrowed from productivity culture and mistakenly bolted onto Stoic philosophy after the fact. The Stoics didn't measure a life or a single morning by outcomes. The weather, other people's choices, the interruptions that show up uninvited, none of that was ever fully within anyone's control, and judging yourself by things outside your control was, to them, a basic category error. They measured everything instead by effort and character. Did you try? Did you respond with intention, in the moment you were actually given, rather than the one you'd imagined in advance? Did you own the moment, whatever shape it happened to take? This is the real dichotomy of control. Applied concretely to a single morning, you cannot control whether you'll feel exhausted, whether your alarm will fail, whether a genuine emergency will interrupt your plans entirely. You can only control whether you respond to whatever actually happens with deliberate attention, or default into a reaction you didn't consciously choose. Under that definition, a person who wakes up late, feels a flash of frustration, and still chooses to spend the next 10 minutes with real intention instead of spiraling into shame, giving up, or losing the whole day to a bad start, has genuinely succeeded at the challenge, even without a single picture-perfect morning to show for it or post online. Return for a moment to Elena from earlier in this video, the woman who lost 40 minutes to her phone before she'd even gotten out of bed. Under the old, outcome-based definition, that morning was simply a failure. Full stop. But under the real Stoic standard, the question isn't whether she avoided the phone entirely, it's what she did the moment she noticed she was scrolling. If she catches herself, closes the app, and deliberately resets her attention, even 40 minutes in, that moment of noticing and choosing again is the actual practice. It's not a consolation prize. It is, quite literally, the entire point. Asterisk the protocol, the effort scorecard. Ask. At the end of each day, don't ask yourself, did I complete the full routine exactly as planned? Ask one question only. Did I respond to this morning with intention, wherever it happened to start from? A yes counts as a genuine win, even on the mornings that looked nothing at all like the plan you'd written down the night before. Perniclevate, the system that ties it all together. By now, you have 7 individual pieces: a pre-decision made the night before, a protected first 30 minutes, a 60-second override for resistance, a same-day return after any lapse, a written reason underneath the behavior, one single non-negotiable action instead of 10, and an effort-based definition of success instead of an outcome-based one. Individually, each of these solves one specific failure point, but there's a final, quieter insight that ties them together, and it's the reason the Stoics never treated their philosophy as a single technique, but as an integrated way of living. None of these protocols are about the morning at all, not really. The alarm, the phone, the cold air, the broken streak, these are simply the first available proving ground each day, chosen because they arrive early and reliably before decision fatigue has had a chance to accumulate. The actual skill being built, morning after morning, is the capacity to notice an impulse, pause for even a fraction of a second, and choose your response instead of defaulting into whatever the impulse demands. That skill, once built at 6 a.m. in a quiet bedroom with nothing at stake but your own comfort, doesn't stay there. It shows up later that same day, in the meeting where you're tempted to react defensively to criticism. It shows up in the argument with someone you love and the moment right before you say something you'll regret. It shows up in the decision fatigue at 4 p.m., when the easy, impulsive choice looks far more appealing than the deliberate one. This is why the Stoics considered the morning worth training at all. Not because mornings are uniquely important in themselves, but because they are uniquely available, a small, low-stakes arena repeated daily where the exact same muscle used for every other difficult moment in life gets its first rehearsal of the day. Ask. The protocol. The morning today bridge. Ask. At the end of your morning routine, whatever form it takes, ask yourself one closing question. Where else later today will I need this same skill? Name it specifically. A meeting, a conversation, a decision you've been avoiding. You're not just finishing a routine. You're loading the same discipline you just practiced into the rest of your day on purpose instead of leaving it behind in the bedroom. The deeper transformation. So why do 99% of people fail the Stoic morning challenge? Not because they're weak, not because mornings are unusually difficult compared to everything else in life. They fail because they were trained by a culture obsessed with results to see the challenge as a performance, a perfect, photogenic routine to complete and then post about, instead of what it actually is, a daily, repeatable rehearsal for the one skill that quietly determines almost everything else in a life. The skill of choosing your response before your circumstances get the chance to choose it for you. You cannot control the alarm going off at the worst possible moment. You cannot control the night that steals your sleep, or the morning that falls apart before it's even begun through no fault of your own. But you can control whether that moment ends up owning you, or whether you own it instead. That was never really about mornings, not at its core. It was about mastering the one variable that was always entirely, completely yours to begin with, long before any alarm ever rang, and long after this video ends. If this changed the way you think about your own mornings, you already know exactly what to do next. Get up tomorrow, not perfectly, just intentionally, and see what actually happens when you stop trying to be flawless and start trying to be present. If this resonated with you, subscribe to Stoic Forge Explained for more videos like this one. And in the comments, tell us honestly, what's the one thing that derails your mornings the most? And which of today's protocols are you going to try first?